IVM.
Hello and welcome to the Habit Coach podcast. I am Ashton Doctor, your habit coach, and today we have a very special guest with us, Dr. Radhika Bapat. She's a clinical psychologist, and I wanted her on the show because she's doing some amazing work in demystifying psychology. You know, it's normally seen as this dark art, in some forms because you're demystifying the brain and you're trying to figure it out. But what Radhika is doing is she's actually making it so simple for all of us to actually understand and know how our processes are working and what we can do with it. So before I continue and jabber on about this, Radhika, welcome to the Habit Coach podcast.
Thank you for having me on. And it's been a pleasure to be invited to the show and to a podcast, which is a platform that I'm not used to.
Is this your first podcast?
This is my first podcast.
Yay! Congratulations.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of firsts during the lockdown. So
absolutely. Yeah. And you know what I like about what you've done is you've completely owned it, right? So for the first time, you put yourself out there. You started making videos and putting them out on Instagram, and that's how I got to know you as well. I think it's a superb initiative that you've taken.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I was not used to. And I think in February, when I started my Instagram for the first time, and then when the followers started raking up, I got to know how much of a need there is. And I think then I started looking at other people doing work in similar area. And then I got to know words like micro-influencer and other influencers. So I think what you're doing is great as well.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much. So welcome to your first podcast. Let's get cracking. So Radhika, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself? So they get a little context before we get into things.
Yeah. Very briefly speaking, I did my master's in psychology from Fergusson College in Pune.
Okay.
I did my MPhil in clinical psychology from Kasturba Medical College in Manipal, which is close to Udupi.
All right.
Following that, I worked with Dr. Adele Diamond, who's a cognitive neuroscientist. And so that was part of what I did. And finally, I finished with my PhD in clinical psychology from the Netherlands. So that's kind of what I've done in the last 20 years.
Wow, all over the place.
Yeah. It's actually the same thing, but it's just taken longer to get to where I want to. So if you look at it that way, I've just started my career.
But what part of psychology fascinates you? Why did you get into psychology and what keeps you going?
Oh, I started off with, in my 11th and 12th, I did commerce.
Okay.
And I was going to get into chartered accountancy.
All right.
When I met someone who influenced my life and changed its course completely.
Oh, wow.
And that sort of got me thinking for the first time, what do I want to do in the long run? Because I think at 16, 17, 18, you really don't know where you want to be.
Absolutely.
And of course, I had my mother's. My mother is a voracious reader, and so is my brother. So they kind of got me into doing and pursuing what I want rather than pursuing the money per se. And that's how I am where I am today. So I switched in my 12th grade, and I did arts, which was known as the field that people take when they have nothing else to do. But then psychology was not as popular as it is today. And especially now during this lockdown. So I'm really happy to say, World Mental Health Day is around the corner. It's on the 1st of October.
Okay.
And I think this year it's going to be a big bang because of what's happening with all of us.
Absolutely. Yeah. In the last 6 months, the number of messages that I've been getting as well on Instagram about mental health has been crazy. And I'm sure 4 times that amount must be coming to you because it is a burning question on everyone's mind, right? So there is so much uncertainty taking place. People don't know where their lives are heading. They don't know how to even think about setting goals or setting life orientations. And I think there is just that uncertainty looming over everyone's mind, which is causing this.
Absolutely. And I also see a lot of people, a lot of Instagram posts where they talk about, we have to achieve this goal because they're trying to push themselves to achieve a certain goal in this lockdown period.
Correct.
There is also, of course, the feeling that I can't achieve this goal because look at everybody else going and getting whatever they want. And here I am, I have to work, I have to look after the house, I have kids, I have everything. And how am I going to implement what I intend doing?
Correct.
So implementation of intentions is a big one.
Right.
And there's a lot of work in psychology in this area, actually.
Okay.
where we all have goals, and at times we cannot always translate them into actual doing or actions. And there are various reasons for this. I mean, there's specifically, actually, there are 3 reasons which psychologists point out.
Okay.
The first is we may fail to get started.
All right, because we just don't start.
Because we're like, oh my God, there's no way I can do this.
Right.
It's too good. This person is too great. This is, I can't.
Right.
So we may fail to get started altogether. The second is you might get distracted halfway through.
Okay.
So you've started and then you feel, oh, this is boring, or something comes along the way and you're, as it is, doing something that you don't really like, or you're resisting from within. And so you're distracted and you fall off. And third is, of course, you fall off the wagon. So you have a lapse.
Okay.
And then you decide that nahi ho raha hai, because one day I just kind of screwed up, and so that means forget about it. I can't start again.
Interesting. So the difference between the two is, one is you lose interest and the other is that you have a lapse.
Yeah. And when you have a lapse, you just beat yourself up silly. Saying that's it. That means I'm a failure. That's it. You jump to that place in your brain. Actually, there's a really wonderful saying by Oscar Wilde in the Picture of Dorian Gray, which I remember, and I think it's a little bit bleak. But anyways, he said that good resolutions are useless attempts to interfere with scientific laws. Their origin is pure vanity.
Correct.
And result is absolutely nil. So should we be pessimistic about goal setting and attainment? And this was the question that psychologists actually asked themselves for many, many years.
Interesting. And did you all come to a conclusion? Was there a consensus?
So it's funny because I identify with this a lot myself. Good intentions, which we all make. For example, every December for the new year or just before my birthday, I say, I'm going to do this. But good intentions have a really bad reputation.
Right.
So, they say that the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Good intentions, absolutely.
Anyway, so I think psychologists say that don't despair yet. As woeful and somber and Eeyore-ish as I sound, they actually have good news.
Oh.
There's something called as the theory of planned behavior.
Okay.
Which originated in the year that I was born, 1980. So you know that I'm 40 years old now. So anyway, it links one's beliefs, one's behavior.
Interesting.
Yeah. It has actually been used to influence behaviors in advertising, in public relations, in healthcare, and actually now what is pertinent is even in voting. Since in the US they are having all of this.
Correct.
So anyway, strong intentions. Strong intentions actually help you get to where you want more often than you think.
And before intentions, there are beliefs. Is that how it works? So beliefs turn into intentions, intentions turn into your goals. Is that the?
Yeah. So we don't know. There's no causal link.
Okay.
It's relational. We don't know. But what we do know is that weak intentions don't do the same.
Absolutely.
The secret to doing this is basically to remove as many impediments as possible between your intention and your goal.
Okay.
So essentially, let's say you want to go for a jog in the morning. Keep everything you need for that jog ready the previous night.
Correct.
And, for example, in my case, I actually used to wear my socks so that I could just, in the morning get out. So there are fewer things that come between what I want to do and where I want to go.
Correct.
Yeah, but psychologists would never encourage you to not have good intentions or goals. So that's not a conclusion that you want to come to from the talk. But another little tip is they say that take one day at a time. While you might have like a really long-term goal or what we call as an aspiration, you want to take little steps as long as they're in the right direction. So there's a movie called as What About Bob?
Okay.
And, I loved what the psychiatrist in that movie said is that, baby steps, but in the right direction. So when you focus on little steps and let the goal dissolve into the background once you've set it, the tiny steps start mattering, no matter how tiny they are, as long as they are in the right direction. So I call them a vector. You have one direction and you choose that direction.
And that direction typically gets set by your intent. And then you keep making those small steps in that direction. And I keep getting questions like, I am very goal focused and I have to look at my goal every day. And I realize that sometimes drives people insane, because like you keep looking at goal, and then you never realize how much you've achieved, because you're just focusing at the end. You're not actually looking at those baby steps that you've taken along the way. So there has to be that balance between the two.
I think you've hit the nail on the head, because there's actually a third piece of advice that psychologists give, which is exactly what you just said. Apart from goal specificity, they say that what goal specificity does is it helps you with feedback and monitoring. So now we have, of course, all of these devices which tell you every little step that you take.
Yeah, exactly. I'm wearing all of them. Yeah.
I'm wearing none of them. But the idea is, they say that you need to start focusing on the learning curve rather than on your performance. And this is a problem. Of course, it suits a lot of the companies that are selling performance to sell that, because that's what they're selling.
Yes.
So, for example, if I love to binge watch Netflix, and this is a real example actually, and this is affecting my sleep adversely. So my natural sleep cycle is I sleep at 8:30 or 9 tops. And I was starting to sleep at 1 or 2, despite knowing all of the theory on how important sleep is and its neurobiological implications and all of that, especially for an old woman like me. So whereas I knew I wanted to sleep for 8 hours starting at 9, once that was set as the goal, my pathway there was more about the learning. So I didn't really fail every time I did something that was unhealthy. So I watched 1 extra episode of Netflix, and then I didn't hurt myself so much that I felt like, I'm going to give this up.
Interesting.
So I just learned another reason why I wasn't able to do what I had intended on doing. That learning is what they say you need to focus on. Eventually, I got to where I wanted, and now it's very unlikely that you'll see me awake beyond 9 p.m. So for health promotion, what psychologists say is it's important for you to focus on that health promoting activity of what you're doing rather than your fears of health deterioration. You don't want to have fear motivation.
Interesting.
Because that's short-lived.
Correct.
And it screws up your quality of life. And it's okay if that helps you kind of jumpstart your plans, because you feel like, oh, shoot, some friend of mine had a heart attack and he's only 40 years old and I better start. So that's okay for them.
Yes.
That's it.
I was in fact going to say that fear is the best way of getting your ass out of the chair. To start. Fear is damn good at starting. But then you need something to continue. And you need something that gives you the constant steady supply.
Absolutely.
What is that? So you have fear, and then what is that constant steady supply?
So essentially, one skill that really helps with achieving your goals is they're called self-regulatory skills. And these are known as executive functions in psychology. Now, executive functions make possible mentally playing with ideas. And they taking the time to think before acting, meeting novel, unanticipated challenges, boosting temptations, staying focused. These are all called core executive functions. And they include, so they're part of your frontal brain, frontal lobe, sorry. And what Adele Diamond, who basically who was my mentor, she said that response inhibition essentially means self-control.
Correct.
And also interference control, which means selective attention. You want to focus on this and you're able to do this. Or thinking creatively outside the box. And it's a whole another episode if you want to talk about this. But essentially for kids, they say that part of what helps with executive functioning is unstructured leisure.
Okay.
Which I think is a problem these days because everybody wants to structure everything.
Yes.
4 is this class, 4 to 5 is this class.
Correct.
But also games, sports, dance, these things, and consistently doing them. They help EFs at a very, very early age.
Okay.
So self-regulatory skills is one thing, but we also look at barriers that stop us from achieving our goals. And one more barrier is not having self-compassion.
Interesting.
So, yeah. That's one.
So compassion is one thing that I definitely want to touch upon. But this executive function is very interesting. So there is this one part, like we were saying, that fear gets you started. But then along the way, in order to continue, there are like 2-3 things that you need to do. Like you're saying executive function. One aspect of executive function is your thinking and your learning, correct? I'm guessing those are 2 aspects of it. So if you're constantly learning along the way, your chance of achieving that goal is again keeping your motivation up and your direction in that particular, in the way that you want to go. It's giving you that drive. Correct? It's also dealing with the problems that come across. So if you get a problem and then you don't do anything about it, you're not using that executive function. Am I right in that, in understanding it?
That's putting it, I mean, that's too simplistic, but yeah, cognitive flexibility is what is the technical word that I would use for it. That, you're not stuck with one thing, you're flexible with, let's say, your plan, you didn't start at 8 o'clock, you were supposed to start at 8. Okay, it's fine.
Okay,
but a lot of people, they say that, 8 o'clock, oh my, now I'm not going to do whatever I wanted to do because I woke up late and screwed up my whole day. So yes, cognitive flexibility is very important.
Correct.
And also, of course, like I said, self-control is an executive function. So, you have these to work. That's something that's kind of anxiety provoking. But you're resisting acting impulsively. You're saying, okay, it's okay if I get in 20 minutes today and I'm going to go and do the rest of my work. It's okay. I won't get that full 1 hour. So stuff like that. So you're playing with ideas mentally.
Right. Playing with ideas, being flexible in understanding that, okay, this was what I had planned. I can't do it 100%. Let me do 50%. Let me do 20%. Let me at least try. And then keeping that happening is going to keep you moving in that direction. Perfect.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Love it. Okay,
you're kind of meeting unanticipated challenges. And that's what life is. I mean,
that's what life is. Exactly.
That's what this COVID is. We are meeting an unanticipated challenge. More so for some people, of course, because it affects their roti kapda makan. So I'm not talking about that class distinction, but I'm talking about when you have everything. And you're able to get going. Correct.
And how are people dealing with these challenges? What have you seen recently? Is there a structured way of dealing with such challenges? Can you actually say, I need to do this, and this in order to become strong or fortified for it?
I mean, so again, when you look at the East-West perspective, which is what I have to talk about, and I'm no... I don't think I have the authority to speak about the Eastern perspective as much. But yes, I have learned from my own teachers about, let's say, Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, and you say there's Yama, Niyama, Pranayama, Asana, and everybody is posting pictures of them doing all of these asanas. And I say, hey, well, how about the first few steps before we get there, which is essentially routine, which is what everybody is talking about. When they say routine, the idea is, however small the step, which means I get up at this time and I sleep at this time. It could just be these two fulcrums. They kind of give you the stability.
Correct.
To everything else in between. So routine is actually, one must not underestimate.
Yes.
The importance of routine. And by routine, we do not mean 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12. I think people misunderstand routine with structure throughout the day and it being an engaged structure. I think routine just means you have certain very important points in your day which repeat themselves. So know in the morning you get up at this time, you eat at this time, you drink at this time, you bathe, that sort of a thing.
Correct. So you have your anchor points set through the day.
Absolutely. Your body gets the message that it's life as usual. There's no emergency. It's not a fight or flight sort of a, anxiety provoking situation, which it could be and which it is actually. So.
Yeah. In fact, just a few weeks ago, I'd done this podcast called The Perfect Storm, where, everything suddenly sometimes seems to become a huge issue at once. And that becomes the perfect storm. And I was saying that the only way to deal with that is not to go out and try and fight that storm, but just go back to your routine and make sure that you feel that your every day is going the same. That storm will pass and then you'll be able to go out and conquer it, because otherwise you're just wasting energy going out constantly trying to, like a ship, you don't want to take the ship out of a harbor when there's a perfect storm happening there. Absolutely. And your routine is your anchoring point for your day.
Yes. And it also regulates your breathing. So.
Oh, there you go. Right? Breathing so critical. Absolutely. Yeah. And so the challenges that we are facing, you were saying, focus on your routine, structure, but not just unnecessarily over-structured days.
Yes.
Correct. All right. Perfect. Then we were talking about compassion and our self-talk.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on that?
Well, so when we look at barriers that stop us from achieving our goals, the barrier, I think, and a very important one, is not having self-compassion. And when I kind of posted something on this in Instagram some time back, and I got a lot of comments saying, are you saying that, we Indians, we don't love ourselves the way the Westerners do? And I said, wait, no. Self-compassion is not narcissistic love.
Yes.
Some things. Rather, it is a kind, compassionate, accepting stance towards oneself when times are tough. So not only does this help with reducing stress and increasing your resilience, but it may also kind of help you get to where you want in terms of your long-term goals. So mindfulness actually is a part of self-compassion, alongside being kind and humane to yourself. So, so many studies have shown how this works.
Okay.
If you want me to give you an example, for example, let's say you have an exercise or a diet goal transgression. I see so many people at times, myself included, being very ashamed or guilty or being frustrated or criticizing oneself severely and then just, giving up, saying, actually, one of my mentors used to say this, his name is Albert Ellis, he would say, screw it, I won't do it.
Correct.
So what self-compassion does is it helps you to never give up, to actually stay on track. Like a story that I can think of. I don't know if you. When I was a child, my mother used to tell me the story of King Robert, the Bruce, and the spider. Do you know, right?
No, tell me.
Yeah, okay. So somewhere around the 1300s, there was this King Robert, the Bruce. This is my memory of the story, all right?
Correct.
He was crowned the King of Scotland, and he tried to free Scotland from the English enemy. And after being defeated, at battle, he kind of escaped. And he managed to find a hideout in this big cave. And he was really tired, and he kind of felt really sick at heart. And I remember this word because she said he felt sick at heart. He was strong, but he felt sick at heart.
Nice.
And he was ready to give up all hope. And I feel that a lot of times when we transgress from our goal on a day, or we have some function and we celebrate that ceremony with our family, you feel sick at heart that, oh no, I have transgressed,
Correct.
So that's what happened to him. And it seemed to him that there was no use for him to try and do anything anymore, which is what we all feel.
Yes.
So as he lay there thinking, he kind of noticed this spider over his head, getting ready to kind of weave her web. And I love that they used her web. So that's another thing that I said, yes, weave her web, of course. So he watched her as she walked slowly and with very great care. And of course, this is just part of the story. It's 6 times. Tried to throw her thread from one edge of the cave to another. And 6 times the thread fell short. So I remember her telling me that, he said, the king thought to himself, poor thing. He spoke to the spider saying, you know what it's like to fail 6 times, because he had failed 6 times before in a row. And the spider did not lose hope. She just continued doing what she was doing. And with still more care, she made ready to try for a 7th time. And the king almost forgot his own troubles and his heart as he was completely fascinated. And she swung herself out upon this line. And he thought to himself, would she fail? And no, the thread was carried safely to the cave wall and fastened there. And he was like, yes. And so anyway, I think this is a story that I remember when I think about when you're sick at heart, because, you don't have self-compassion. And of course, he went out and he won and all of that. But I feel that when you view transgressions less negatively and you continue to pursue the goal that you wanted, you can get right back on track the very next day or the next opportunity, because negative emotions are very draining in the end. So yeah, that's what I remember.
But is there a personality type that is more negative talk oriented and positive talk oriented, or is it a skill that you have to learn to be positive talk oriented, and by default we are all negative talk oriented? Is there any learnings like that?
Yes, actually. So there's a lot of research that's inconclusive. Talks about state and trait.
It talks about, sorry, what?
State, which is something that happens in a fixed period of time, or trait, where it's your personality.
All right.
What they say now is that irrespective of which it is, let's say it's your personality type, this skill can be learned. So, and the other thing, when they speak about brain plasticity, they say it can be learned at any age. So when you say you're too old to learn, I'm 80 years old, I can't change. That's not, that doesn't work. Sorry, you may feel that way, but that's not what science says. It says you can learn no matter what age. Of course, the rate of learning is different at different ages.
Correct.
But yeah, so there is no end to when you can start anew.
Absolutely. And are there negative words that you see people use more often that people should be conscious about, catch and say, I should not be using this? Is there a better alternative that people should be using?
Yes, actually. So now if you speak about mindfulness skills, because that kind of ties into how and what and how you label what you're doing. I think that usually what we want is, let's say, long-term and sustainable healthy dietary lifestyle for morbid conditions like, let's say, high cholesterol.
Perfect.
Mindful eating kind of focuses on paying attention to hunger and satiety or being full cues. It's very important to take a non-judgmental position towards yourself and your relationship with food. And for non-judgmental, words are really important.
Okay.
So the rationale is, when you train your body enough, eventually it will intrinsically know the quantity and type of food required for itself to maintain good health. Another word we use for this is body wisdom. And we certainly don't want to use words such as cheat days. That's just, in my humble opinion, melancholy.
Correct.
It's barbarous. It's vicious. It's sadistic. And it's completely 100% tactless. And I'm using all of these adjectives. So, so yeah, I think there are a lot of mindful eating programs that psychologists speak about, where they say that it's very, very important how you label what you do. And you're looking at self-regulation of emotions and working alongside awareness of physical hunger, stomach fullness, taste satisfaction, food cravings, blah, blah, blah. So cheat day has no place in that. What is a cheat? What are you cheating on? Who are you cheating on? You know?
Correct.
Is it that you don't trust yourself anymore? Yeah. So that's a word that I feel one shouldn't use.
But is there an alternative? Like, how would you describe it?
I would say I'm just not on schedule today. I'm choosing to eat differently today. You know, it's
interesting.
Like as usual, it's basically I want to have dessert today, but I'm going to go back on track with my routine from tomorrow. So it's a no routine day.
Yeah, so interesting, because so many words are what I like to call lazy words, right? They don't describe anything. So a cheat day doesn't describe what you cheated on, how much you cheated on. So, I had a cheat day. Acha, what did you eat? No, I had 4 grapes instead of 2. Arey, that means like, as compared to, I had a cheat day. What did you have? I had 4 sev paratha puris, 35 kulfis, 64 brownies. Both are cheat days, right? So they're lazy words. They didn't describe anything. Similarly, the word bad is a lazy word. Like, your version of bad is different from my version of bad. It doesn't tell me anything.
Correct.
And so I think it's important for us to start understanding, whenever we use these words, catch ourselves and saying that, did I actually do justice to what I was trying to communicate at that point of time?
Absolutely.
And not to the person, but to myself. Did I do justice in communicating to myself?
I think that's one thing in therapy. We kind of always clarify. We ask people to relate, not a word, but an experience. So it's more like a chronicle or a narrative or in some ways illustration. Or, some people, they like to kind of catalog, elucidate, discuss, charge, expound, impart, all of that. And I say that that's beautiful, because you are then articulating so many more things in just one word, because that's what you know, and linguistically sometimes we're challenged.
Correct.
That's what's been fed to us out there in the media.
Yes. And how would you do that to yourself? How would you self-regulate this kind of a behavior? Is there a way?
Which kind of a behavior?
The behavior when you are talking to yourself and you want to start making better choices in the words that you use. How would you start regulating that?
So the thing that I do, it's interesting, is I actually should show you. I'm using this I have a dictionary.
Oh, wow. Lovely.
And I realized that, I'm going to put this down. My son and I, we had this. It's not just any dictionary. It's actually a dictionary with big words, so that I can read, because I'm getting older.
Nice. Listen, you just told everybody your age, and you can't keep saying I'm getting older.
Anyway, so I use it.
When we are talking about self-talk, I love it.
So I struggle with words that I say that I know what it is in a sentence, And so let me look up to see if there's a better way for me to express it. And then and also we play games actually.
Nice.
Open to a new word and we learn a new word every day and we use it a few times that day. I do think people's lexicon is very limited.
Correct.
Because we have now emojis and so many shorter ways of expressing ourselves. And there's a lot of problem in the way people understand what you're saying. So you might not be saying what the other person or what you mean to say, or the other person might not be listening or hearing what you want to say. So I say that, communication is always an issue and one must always sort of clarify what one means. So, yeah.
I actually love the fact that you said this because very often we can't make a change because we don't necessarily understand the vocabulary or we don't know how we should be expressing ourselves. Yeah. There was a podcast that we did on the feeling wheel, right? So Plutchik's wheel of feelings, right? And I was saying that every time I ask someone, how you doing? I get fine, good, so, right? Beyond that, but none of those are feelings. Like I was like, so how are you feeling? Okay. Like what is okay? So what we do is we put up this chart in our house and we look at it and I say, today I am feeling apathetic. What does that mean? Okay, let me first search for it. And you start learning about feelings and you say, yeah, that happens to me sometimes. I just did not know how to express it.
Yeah.
Correct? And I think so much of the way that we deal with our life and we deal with the situation that we're going through is just because we don't know how we're feeling in order to address it. So putting a word to it, I think definitely helps in that.
Yeah, I mean, and I also like etymology.
So the origins.
Yeah. So when you look at okay, probably, I don't know how to pronounce these words, so excuse my pronunciation, but it's probably an abbreviation of all correct, which is a humorous form of all correct. And it was kind of popular during a particular president's election in 1800s or 1840s in the US. And his nickname was Old Kinderhook.
Oh, wow. Also from there, okay.
Okay.
Words are fascinating things.
Yeah, and speaking of election campaigns, I mean.
So fantastic. So we have right from the starting we spoke about creating our intentions, right? We start off with intention because the intention is what's going to root us, give us the direction, making sure that we have a good, solid intention. Then along the way, not just letting the fear drive us, but understanding what are my learnings from this? How can I accept what has happened, be flexible in that situation, and that's going to keep me on the path longer. Then what you spoke right about in the beginning was people don't start. And that is obviously the biggest reason for not reaching your goals, because you just don't start. The second is losing interest. We didn't speak about how do you maintain interest. Is it something that you should, or should you actually be trying to find different things to do and become a multi-potentialite, or should you actually focus on one thing? Is there something that you want to, is there a thought there?
So, like I said, it does not matter if people, when you look at skill sets, there are some people who are actually very good with multitasking, and there are others who are not. So that would be just a kind of a very personalized thing. I think what's important is being honest with yourself if you're not able to manage too many things at one time, and then slowing down, because we know that it has a lot of health problems. Nowadays, the correlates of having to do so many things at one time is a problem, apart from screens, of course.
Yes.
But I think it's important to have insights, and not just intellectual insight, because intellectual insight is you understand what's going on, but you don't do anything about it. Emotional insight is an aha experience.
Okay.
Where in Marathi there's a saying, you say, "Karte pan varat nahi hai," which means I understand, but I'm not able to, act on it. That's what we call as an intellectual insight.
Right.
And you have people in parties who say, yeah, I get it, I understand all of that. And then they're not able to make that movement. So in emotional insight, what happens is you are either extremely shocked, like you said, into doing something where you suddenly have this feeling of, wait, I just got it. And Gestaltists call it the aha moment that we have, or Archimedes' Eureka moment.
Correct.
When that happens, that kind of really helps with the movement of behavior from point A to point B. So they say that you need to educate yourself more about something. If you're not convinced, don't just tell someone, okay, I'll do it, and then, fall off the wagon. You have to be really convinced about something. And for that, you really have to keep asking, and then say, okay, I'm convinced. Because let's say I believe that I like certain foods. And let's say I have very high cholesterol and my nutritionist and my lipidologist tells me, stay away from this. I will look for data online that kind of says that it's okay to have those things, because nowadays you put in the search words.
You can argue both ways for everything. Correct.
So, you say, and you get both sides of the coin, right? You say it's okay to have loni or butter. Is it not okay to have butter? So you'll get whatever you're searching for. And so it's really important to know both sides of the argument and to educate yourself and then say, okay, I think I'm convinced. Once that has happened, then you're making an informed choice into doing something or not doing it. So I think that is one small thing that helps with getting from point A to B. Once it's happened in the intellectual space, when you want to translate it into physical actions, then we say start with, let's say you want to start exercising. Then you say from tomorrow onwards, I'm going to go, for a 1 hour ride. We say, no, first start really small. Let it be 15 minutes, but 15 minutes every day for a month. So much so that now it's a part of, it becomes a habit. So there's something called as Hebb's law, which says that neurons that fire together, wire together, which essentially means that if there's a grass path and you're walking, there's no path. There's just like this place and you keep walking on a certain path, eventually you will see a path. That's what happens in the brain. And that's what we say is learning.
Correct.
That you also learn what not to do. You learn the impediments that come between you and your goal. You learn that, let's say, if I have a late night at 10 o'clock, it's hard for me in the morning and then that's it. So all of these are learnings. And post that, a month later, once you got those 15 minutes, you up the goal to 17 minutes.
Right.
Because this is not a short-term achievement that you want. It's a long-term lifestyle change that you're looking at. So that's how we get from point A to point B. What's happening is, I think, media makes everything about appearances. It's not about health.
Correct.
And so you see these before and after pictures. It's more like, the angel and the demon, good and bad, right and wrong, black and white. So people want to just kind of go from one to the other and jump all the steps in between. And honestly, it doesn't make sense to do things like body shaming and then saying that just because she was thin before and, after having a baby, she's fat. And so this is good and that is bad. That's complete nonsense. I feel that labeling, again, in that manner, where a certain body type is good, a certain body type is bad, is also a huge problem. There was a very interesting research. I don't know if I'm digressing.
Please go for it.
But in psychology, there's a very, very nice paper that came out. Not one, actually. 3 papers that came out that studied Playboy centerfolds for 50 years. And they saw how their body type changed over those 50 years. So the very first paper that came out realized that the BMI is getting lower and lower and lower.
Correct.
And so what people are wanting to achieve is actually unhealthy. And then they started doing something about it, and now it's reversed slightly, but that doesn't mean that they are of a healthy body type now.
Correct.
Now they say that at least we don't have any anorexics or bulimics on our panel. So, we shouldn't believe everything that we see out there.
We need to take our own informed choices. We need to learn how to do our own research. And I think that is a very, very important step in this whole process. Absolutely. Do you know how to search for yourself? Do you know how to understand that I should not be listening to this? This doesn't sound legit. Versus something that does sound legitimate. Superb. Radhika, it was fantastic talking to you. Where can people reach out to you? Where can people connect with you?
So currently, my public profile on Instagram is Psychotherapy Bar. And that's where I am available. But I get too many direct messages. However, I do post stuff for free, and I give a lot of freebies to people who want information with references or books or self-help tools. And so I think that's the best place. If you want to get in touch with me, it should be on email, and the email address is also on there.
Okay, lovely. So thank you, Radhika, so much for joining us on the Habit Coach podcast. And we have another episode coming out on Thursday. So guys, please tune in and listen to that. We're going to be talking about rock bottoms and how to get out of them. Thank you, Radhika.
You're welcome. It was great being here.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to reach out to me, I am Ashdin Doc on Twitter and Instagram. You can find lots more information on my website, awesome180.com, or check out different content on my YouTube channel called AWESOME180. That's Awesome180.
I hope you enjoyed that show. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Intel, for supporting us. First, right off the bat, want to congratulate Ashdin Doctor on celebrating the 300th episode of The Habit Coach. It's a great show. If you haven't been listening to it, listen to it now. And if you listen to it, you can almost go for an entire year with an episode a day. It's really fun. Do definitely check that out. Arjun Koladi, the head of sales for Spotify in India, was on Advertising is Dead. Do check that out. Really fun show. On Cyrus Says, we had Samit Basu, the author, fantasy author, one of my favorites. Definitely do check that out. It was Utsav Memorial Week this week on the IVM network. He was on Cyrus Says Cock and Bull on Thursday. He was on Litnama and, of course, his own podcast, Postcards from Nowhere. Do check that out. And one last note before we go. IVM Likes is back, and we've been doing a bunch of interesting conversations about different pop culture things that you might want to check out during the pandemic. Do give it a listen. I'm sure you'll enjoy that. And with that, I hope to see you again next week.
Hi, I'm Satyajit.
Hi, I'm Racheta.
We are from the Open Library Project and we host a podcast called Paperback.
Paperback is a podcast where we engage with stalwarts and experts from various industries, suggesting non-fiction titles that contributed to their journey in a big way.
We've had guests like Anjali Rana, Dr. Marcus Rani, Dr. Swati Lodha, Ambi Parmeswaran, Apurva Damani, and many more on our show Paperback. Find new episodes every Wednesday on IVM Podcast app, website, or wherever you listen to podcasts.